Hello and welcome to my ESE design project. So for my project, I decided to focus on the issue of flooding that would arise from having a constant flow of water through UTEP's arroyo. My solution includes implementing sensors, drainage systems, reservoirs, and a computer program to control the functions of this system. So as you can see here in the diagram, within the arroyo itself we have a top sensor and a bottom sensor. The function of the top sensor is that if the water rises to such a level that it is touching that top sensor, the computer program will then open the door on the bottom of the arroyo and drain water into the reservoir until it is back at a safe level. The bottom sensor actually has an opposite function. If the water is not touching the bottom sensor, which would imply that the water has fallen to a really low level, water from the reservoir will actually be pumped back into the arroyo to maintain a constant flow. Now, the reservoir is also prone to overflowing if there's very heavy rainfall. So there is a sensor within the reservoir as well, and if the water is rising to a level where it touches that sensor, the computer program will actually take advantage of a system that's already in place that drains the water from the arroyo into the Rio Grande and actually carry out that function of draining water from the reservoir into the Rio Grande. Now, in an effort to relate this to my major, which is computer science, I wrote a Java program to simulate the basic functions that a program would have within the system. So this is what the code actually looks like. The real thing would be a lot longer and a lot more complicated, but once again, this was just to simulate the basic functions of this system. So the program would check a few basic things. It would first check if the water is touching the top sensor. If it is, it would drain water from the arroyo into the reservoir until it's back at a safe level. If the water is not touching the top sensor, then no action is required. Next, it would check if the water is touching the bottom sensor. If it is, no action is needed. But if it is not, then it would pump water from the reservoir into the arroyo to maintain that constant flow. Next, it would check if the water in the reservoir is touching the reservoir sensor. If it is, then it would drain water into the Rio Grande until it's back at a safe level. If it isn't, then no action is required. As far as where the system would be implemented on campus, I actually went and followed the path of the main arroyo and identified a few areas that I would deem high risk and low risk. The areas highlighted in green are low risk areas. They're a lot more open and wide and have a lot more vegetation, which means they're a lot less prone to flooding. The areas highlighted in blue are high risk areas. These areas are a lot more enclosed and they're a lot smaller and are also around campus walkways and buildings and have actually flooded in the past and caused disruptions within the campus. So I would suggest that this system be implemented in these high-risk areas first. So that pretty much does it for my presentation. Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in class.